Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr President. And I rise to speak about the decision by the Barnett government to close significant numbers of homeland communities in Western Australia. And Mr Barnett has been forced to do that by the withdrawal of funding of over 50 years by the Abbott government as part of its harsh, cruel budget cuts. And Aboriginal people living on homeland communities in Western Australia, and Western Australia has the highest number, or one of the highest numbers, of homeland communities in the country, are caught in the crossfire between the Abbott and Barnett governments as they shunt responsibility for who funds the municipal services in these communities. And I would like to make the parallel that if there was an issue with municipal services in a small country town, I doubt the first response of governments would be to move people out and shut their houses down. I doubt that very much. In a white community would not be standing here saying, because we're now withdrawing funding for municipal services, we're going to shut your town down. But in actual fact, that is exactly what Premier Barnett has said to those communities. No consultation, nothing. We're just going to shut you down because we don't want to fund your municipal services, despite the fact that municipal services are funded in very small regional and rural communities right across Western Australia. They don't want to do it for these communities. And why do they get away with it? Because Aboriginal people, by and large, still remain voiceless in our country. And both of these governments, both the Abbott government and the Barnett government, have appalling records when it comes to government spending. Barnett has wasted millions of public money on a hospital it failed to open 18 months overdue, and an amount of $118 million paid to the private for-profit operator before the hospital even opened. Imagine if the homeland communities got the bonus of being able to invest $118 million. And the Abbott government, despite saying everyone has to be part of its harsh, cruel budget, everyone has to share the pain, that is not true when it still wants to continue with its paid parental leave scheme for the wealthy. And last week, we had the Productivity Commission report, which shows little improvement in key areas of Aboriginal advantage. But that doesn't stop the Abbott government ripping millions of dollars from homeland communities in Western Australia, which, according to Premier Barnett, means that over half of those communities are now under threat of closure. Now, rightly so, the Barnett government has copped criticism over this announcement, and my Labor colleagues called him out when they visited those homeland communities, something Premier Barnett didn't bother to do with his he-knows-best attitude. But Ben Wyatt and Josie Farah did visit. And we know academic research shows that over the past 30 years, a growing body of research has indicated that life at homelands or outstations might be better in health outcomes, livelihoods, social cohesion and housing conditions than in larger communities. And we had Pat Dodson, a Yawuru man, a well-respected Aboriginal leader, come out this week and really say it as it is when he said that we would create an internal group of displaced persons, and he said you would have displaced Aboriginal people from their homelands or their traditional country relocated onto lands and into places that are not necessarily country, that they identify with or have affiliation with, and to be mixed among people who they may or may not have good or lasting relationships with. There's some kind of assumption, Mr Dodson went on to say, that by a process of osmosis people will be absorbed into the mainstream Western life. And even the Barnett government's got it confused. The Premier said communities with less than 5 people living of them were on his target list. At the very same time, his Minister for Aboriginal Affairs in the Legislative Council was saying something quite different, saying absolutely nonsensical that communities with 5 people or less would be closed. So here we have the biggest bungle we've seen that will impact the lives of Aboriginal people if the Abbott and Barnett governments don't get their acts together. And I'm saying that Aboriginal people need to be treated like every other Australian, and either the Abbott government or the Barnett government needs to put the municipal services in place and respect the rights of Aboriginal people. Thank you, Mr. President.